The Middle East once again finds itself on the precipice of a wider conflict, a situation brought into sharp focus by a dramatic series of events. On June 12 and 13, 2025, Israeli warplanes conducted extensive airstrikes against more than 100 strategic targets deep inside Iranian territory. The operation was bold and precise, hitting nuclear facilities, ballistic missile factories, and critical air defense systems. This aggressive military action was a significant escalation in the long-simmering shadow war between the two regional adversaries. The strikes demonstrated Israel's capability and its willingness to act unilaterally to neutralize what it perceives as an existential threat from Tehran's military and nuclear ambitions. Following this major military operation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a direct and urgent appeal to his most powerful ally, the United States. He formally requested that American forces join Israel in any subsequent military actions against Iran, essentially asking for a joint war effort. This was not the first time such a request had been made. A similar plan had been rejected by the Trump administration back in April 2025. Netanyahu's plea underscored the immense stakes involved, and his belief that a unified front was necessary to decisively counter the Iranian regime, particularly after years of escalating tensions and proxy conflicts across the region. The context for this request is a region already inflamed by conflict. The cycle of violence has been intensifying since the Hamas attacks of October 7, 2023, which triggered a cascade of retaliatory actions. Iran, for its part, has not hesitated to respond to Israeli provocations. It launched significant missile and drone barrages against Israel in both April and October of 2024, testing the limits of Israeli defenses. The recent Israeli strikes in June were, in many ways, the culmination of this dangerous back and forth, pushing the long-standing hostilities out of the shadows and into the open, threatening to engulf more nations in the process. In response to Israel's devastating strikes, Iran's retaliation was swift and predictable, though largely symbolic in its immediate impact. On June 13, Tehran launched a wave of at least 100 drones and a volley of ballistic missiles aimed at Israel. While these were reportedly intercepted, the message was clear: Iran would not absorb such an attack without a response. Iran's armed forces spokesman General Abolfazl Shekarchi went further, vowing a definite counterattack against both Israel and the United States, flatly rejecting American claims of non-involvement and holding Washington responsible for the actions of its closest regional partner. The White House response to Prime Minister Netanyahu's request was swift, unequivocal, and public. The United States would not participate in direct military action against Iran. President Trump communicated this decision directly, emphasizing a clear preference for diplomatic channels over military escalation. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reinforced this position, stating plainly to the world, "We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region." This public distancing was a deliberate strategic choice, designed to signal to Tehran and the international community that Washington was not seeking a direct confrontation, and that Israel had in fact acted alone. At the heart of the American refusal is a deep-seated fear of being dragged into a much wider and more unpredictable regional war. A direct U.S. military strike against Iran would almost certainly trigger a massive response, not only against Israel but also against American personnel and assets stationed throughout the Middle East. With thousands of U.S. troops in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf, the administration's primary concern shifted to force protection. The risk of a full-blown war with Iran, a large, populous nation with significant military capabilities, is a scenario that successive U.S. presidents have sought to avoid, viewing it as a costly and potentially catastrophic entanglement. This cautious approach is further bolstered by a strong bipartisan consensus within the U.S. Congress against initiating a war with Iran. Prominent lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, including Republicans like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul and Democrats like Chris Murphy and Ilhan Omar, have voiced staunch opposition. They have consistently urged the administration to steer clear of military involvement, often citing the constitutional requirement for congressional approval to declare war. This legislative resistance provides a powerful domestic check on any presidential impulse to commit U.S. forces to another major conflict in the Middle East, reflecting a war-weary American public. President Trump's administration, despite its tough rhetoric, has been actively pursuing a diplomatic track with Tehran. before the Israeli strikes derailed the process. A sixth round of nuclear talks was scheduled to take place. The president has publicly stated his desire to be a peacemaker and to end what he calls America's forever wars, while he used the Israeli attack as potential leverage, urging Iran to make a deal before there is nothing left. The underlying goal remains a negotiated settlement. The administration believes that diplomacy, however fraught with challenges, is a far more prudent path than a military adventure with unforeseeable consequences for American lives and interests. Despite the firm refusal to join in direct combat, the United States' commitment to Israel's security remains ironclad, expressed through other powerful means. The flow of American military hardware to Israel has been substantial and continuous. Since the regional conflict intensified in October 2023, Washington has provided nearly $18 billion in weapons and approved an additional $8 billion in new arms sales in early 2025. This support includes advanced fighter jets, precision-guided munitions, and other sophisticated weaponry that ensures Israel maintains its qualitative military edge over its adversaries. This policy allows the U.S. to bolster its ally without putting its own soldiers in the line of fire. A crucial component of this support is the reinforcement of Israel's defensive capabilities, particularly its multi-layered missile defense system. The United States has played a vital role in helping Israel thwart previous large-scale Iranian attacks. During the Iranian missile and drone barrages in April and October of 2024, American technical and intelligence support was instrumental in the successful interception of the vast majority of incoming projectiles. This defensive partnership is a cornerstone of the U.S.-Israel alliance, demonstrating a commitment to protecting Israel from attack without engaging in offensive operations that could trigger a wider war. The American strategy, therefore, is one of calculated distinction. It separates defensive support from offensive participation. By providing the tools for self-defense like the Iron Dome and David's Sling systems, the U.S. helps Israel protect its civilian population and critical infrastructure. However, by declining to provide assets like American bunker buster bombs or to have U.S. pilots fly missions against Iran, Washington draws a clear red line. This distinction is intended to prevent the United States from being automatically drawn into every military venture its ally undertakes, preserving American strategic autonomy and avoiding entrapment in a conflict not of its own choosing. This policy of support, but don't fight, is a pragmatic approach to a complex geopolitical problem. It allows the administration to honor its long-standing security commitments to Israel, while simultaneously heeding the warnings from its own military commanders and diplomats about the perils of a direct war with Iran. It is a delicate balancing act, designed to reassure a key ally and deter its enemies, all while keeping American forces out of the direct crossfire. The goal is to empower Israel to defend itself effectively, thereby reducing the perceived need for drastic escalatory actions that could ignite the entire region in flames. The immediate aftermath of the Israeli strikes and the Iranian retaliation has left the region on high alert. The United States' primary objective now is to prevent further escalation and to pull both sides back from the brink. American diplomats are working tirelessly behind the scenes, engaging with regional partners and allies to convey messages of restraint to both Jerusalem and Tehran. The evacuation of non-essential personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and other regional bases just before the strikes indicates that Washington was preparing for the worst. And now every effort is being made to ensure that worst-case scenario does not materialize. The core of the American strategy is to re-establish a baseline of deterrence and stability, convincing both parties that another round of attacks would be disastrous for everyone. For Israel, this involves reassuring them of continued U.S. defensive support, while counseling against further offensive operations. For Iran, the message is a mix of deterrence and diplomacy, a warning that further aggression will bring about greater isolation and pressure, coupled with an open door to return to the negotiating table. The U.S. hopes to leverage the recent crisis to impress upon all parties the urgent need for a diplomatic off-ramp before the cycle of violence spirals completely out of control. Ultimately, the United States seeks a return to a state of managed competition rather than open warfare. The intelligence consensus from just months ago, in March 2025, was that Iran was not actively building a nuclear weapon, though it had the enriched uranium to do so. Military experts have long warned that large-scale strikes on Iran's nuclear program could backfire, incentivizing the regime to dash for a bomb as the ultimate deterrent. By refusing to participate in the strikes, the U.S. hopes to preserve the possibility of a diplomatic solution that contains Iran's nuclear ambitions without resorting to a war that could make a nuclear Iran a self-fulfilling prophecy. The path forward is fraught with uncertainty. The deep-seated animosity between Israel and Iran, coupled with the political pressures on leaders in both nations, makes de-escalation a monumental challenge. The United States finds itself in the difficult position of a mediator, trying to restrain its ally while containing its adversary. The success of this diplomatic tightrope walk will determine whether the Middle East can steer away from a devastating regional conflict. The stated American hope is that through a combination of unwavering defensive support for Israel and a persistent push for diplomacy, a fragile peace can be preserved and a wider war can be averted.